Let's talk season 14 of Drag Race. Here we are.
Yeah. Yes, here we are. We've seen 2 episodes now, and we've met all of the contestants. And there's so much diversity there. We have our first cisgendered heterosexual male contestant, who I thought thus far has been doing really well, and is a really interesting, lovely story. Seeing that dynamic of how somebody wants to do something like drag, which is not something a lot of straight guys do, and him being embraced by the cast and by the show and saying, drag is a place where everyone gets to play with all the different crayons in the crayon box. And it's also been a very diverse and inclusive art form. So it makes sense. And I think it's been really great. So that's been interesting. Who are you liking?
I love Maddie Morphosis just for that reason. I think it's so interesting that there is, I mean, look, I think Drag Race has been great with diversity and inclusion. We've had like trans men, trans women. Right. I think it was about time we had a straight cisgender male that does drag, right? Like Maddie can't be the only person in the whole world, right?
Right. And, maybe he'll inspire other guys that wanted to do drag that didn't feel comfortable doing it. So that's the power of visibility and inclusion on television, is that people see themselves and they say, wait a minute, if they can do it, I can do it.
What about when people, because listen, you all know there's this online community, there's people have an opinion on everything. What about, because it has been somewhat controversial in the sense that people are like, we don't want a straight guy on Drag Race. We don't want that. Then there's like, I mean, I'm not saying that. Don't look at me. And then there's people, especially like when Ru announced this, now that was a whole controversy. Like, why did RuPaul announce this? Like, you shouldn't have announced someone's sexuality. So like, I have no problem with any of this, but like, what do you say to that? Like when people are like, this is a place not really for the straights.
I say that, think of it as a party. It's always more fun when you have a variety of people. And my motto has always been the more, the merrier. So, and it's a competition. So just, we shouldn't be concerned about who's doing it. Let's just be concerned about who's doing it well and make sure that they're recognized.
That's a good point. Has there ever been someone that like won, or someone that you really thought should have won and you're just like, oh, like for me, like not taking anything away from anyone, but I love Gottmik. Like Gottmik is one of my favorites of all time, where you're just like, oh, I'm so upset this person. Do you ever have those moments? You can keep them to yourself, but like where you're just like,
honestly, not really, because when we get down to the top 3, it's usually like kind of like anybody could win for a variety of reasons. It's just, they all tick different boxes. No, I don't think there's ever been a time where I was just like, gosh, I was disappointed by that. I love, I love when people come back for All Stars, and maybe what I have thought while judging is like, gosh, this person could win this like in a year or 2. They just haven't like hosted enough club gigs to like really know how to command a stage, or they just haven't quite figured out what their brand is, or they just haven't quite figured out their clothes. And then they come back like 2 or 3 years later and they've been out there, they've been working, they were on the show. So they get booked now and they're everywhere. And they have more access to, maybe better stylists or helpers in the costume field, or maybe they just get better makeup or whatever, and they come back and they kill it. And I'm just like, oh yes, this is like vindication. Like I have those moments a lot.
What about, is there ever someone that like stands out that maybe went home too early? Like not that should have won, but just you think is like, this is such an underrated queen. Like this queen is just, just maybe didn't perform well her season and is gone.
Right. Oh, there's so many like that actually, because, it is, the first week or 2 of the competition are really hard. Everyone's getting their bearings. If you've not done reality TV before, you're like, wait, I'm going to be up like 12 hours a day and someone's always going to be following me. Like there's a lot of reasons why you may not bring your A game those first couple of weeks. Someone like Vanjie, I mean, she like left and said, Miss Vanjie became like this like internet, breaking moment, and has come back. She's so talented. and has so many fans. So she's kind of the poster child for someone who left early but still wound up slaying the game and came back on an All Stars and showed us, or actually came back one season later and showed us what she's got.
Are you ever shocked? Because I'm shocked. Like, I live in New York. I'm in LA all the time. So like, I've seen so many queens, top queens. I just am always like, how could there be a season 14? Like, how could there be a season 15? Like, haven't we run out? Like, I'm always amazed that
Right.
RuPaul, you, everyone involved just finds so many more interesting people every season.
Well, we have a great casting company and they've won Emmys for it, and they've helped the producers and Ru, who, you know, hand select these people, but they help kind of field that team, and they're really good at it. And I think also the show being so popular, it's created maybe more drag queens. People are more into it, or maybe just, you know, discovered it. So I'm always impressed by, you know, if we have like an 18-year-old queen on who was like, I started doing drag because I watched season like 9. I was like, 9? I was like, what? That was only like 5 years ago. So there's, you know, that's the other thing that I think keeps the show so fresh, is that we always have a fresh crop of new queens. And if you're like me and you're out and about, yeah, I'm always discovering new queens as well. I'm just like, oh my gosh, you need to try out for Drag Race. And they may be like young and new, and they're like, oh, you know, I don't know if I can do it. I was like, well, keep trying out. Like, you know, just eventually one day it's going to click.
Absolutely. Well, you've also done some acting. The Perfect Man. I mean, I have to. Were you in scenes with La Locklear? Like, you had scenes with Heather?
I never did a scene with Heather Locklear. And looking back on that, I do remember that really well. It was like 2004 or 5. We filmed it in Toronto with Chris Noth, and Heather Locklear, Hilary Duff, Kim Whitley, Christine, it'll come to me. But we had a great time making that movie, but I never, ever worked with Locklear, and I don't think I ever even saw her on set. And people will always say, how's that possible? I did a Christmas movie for Hallmark with Carrie Fisher. I never, ever saw her. I wasn't in any scenes with her, and she just wasn't there the days that I was there. So it happens a lot.
It does. As soon as I saw that, I was like, I just need to know if you had a scene with Miss Heather Locklear. I mean,
no. And I was such a fan of Heather Locklear, obviously from, you know, like TJ Hooker, and she was on Dynasty, for God's sake, and Melrose Place, but I never got to see her.
Melrose Place was the best. Yes, I've had Donna Mills on this podcast, and I saw when she posted the thing about they're doing that thing in Palm Springs. You made a comment. So you're obviously a Knots Landing fan as well.
I'm a huge Knots Landing fan. I loved it. I loved all of the women. I love talking. I haven't talked to Donna Mills. Oh, you know who I talk to sometimes on Instagram? Of the same oeuvre is Morgan Fairchild from Flamingo Road.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and she's so smart and, you know, like an amateur epidemiologist. So she had so many words of wisdom about the pandemic. So she's a good one to follow. But when is the Donna Mills Knots Landing reunion in Palm Springs?